Okay, so Rich, what would Invader Zim say about being on the Patrick Labyorteaux show with Patrick Labyorteaux?
Yeah, who are you? Who are you? Patrick Labyorteaux what?
From the heart of Hollywood, it's the Patrick Labyorteaux Show with Patrick Labyorteaux.
It's the Patrick Labyorteaux Show. Patrick Labyorteaux, he's the one you gotta know.
Tonight's episode, Richard Horvitz.
Patrick Labyorteaux Show, he's the one you gotta know.
You know his voice from countless cartoons like Invader Zim and Angry Beavers, and you know his face from Summer School, The Informant, and of course, Deadly Weapon. I know him from Life and the Rick Baker Makeup Studio. Please welcome my buddy, Richard Horvitz.
It's hard to do that, right? It's hard to go
It's
from
hard to do that.
that D to a hard H.
I was just schooled by Richard on how to say his name correctly. How do you say your name correctly when you're doing your slates?
Well, I changed it from Richard to Rich. Rich Horvitz is easier than saying Richard Horvitz. And then you get the Horvitz honk when you do the H. It's like a Richard Horvitz.
You know, with a name like Labyorteaux, it falls off the tongue easily.
I know. I've heard Labyorteaux so many ways. Labyorteaux. I've heard that one. Have you heard Labyorteaux?
Dean Cameron calls me Patrick Labyorteaux, which obviously is my,
that sounds like Dean.
Act 1, beginnings. You just told me something off camera, which I'm going to pull into this interview, which is your mom and you when you got into SAG, you have Richard Stephen Horvitz. So when did you get into acting? A lot younger than I thought. What's your secret origin?
So my origin story, the prequel, is I got into SAG, I believe it was 1978. As I was thinking back, I thought it was 76, but it's 78. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, like a lot of us did, and I was surrounded by child actors. I went to school with Lucy Dreyer. I went to school with Ike and Al Eisenman, and so.
Oh, so you were near Grant,
I was. Yeah, we all went to Grant. We all went to Grant
and Milliken, right? That was
Madison for me, but Milliken.
Okay.
But Moose went to Madison and Milliken. I went to Grant with Ike and his brother Al and Moosey Dreyer. But
Al and I were like best friends. Al and I.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Al was such a jokester in high school. He would do.
Al was one of those kids that was like, everybody has him. Doesn't matter if you're in the industry or not.
Yeah.
He was crazy, literally crazy. Probably still is. Don't know.
I refer to Al as like our version of Jonah Hill. It's like he would say he had no filter, and he did this weird thing. I'm going to share this where he could like lift his tongue and squirt spit. And for some reason, at 15 years old, I was amazed. It was like Doug Henning, the amazing world of Doug Henning.
Highly valued talent.
Yeah, very highly valued talent. But I had grown up watching, Moosey and all of them on, all the after school specials and all that.
Right.
And I had been sat in front of a TV set from a very young age. Like as far back as I can remember, I would just watch TV nonstop. And it was probably because I was the last of 6 children and the age gap is like 23 years between myself and my oldest sister. And same parents. They were married for 76 years by the time they had passed away. They had been married 76 years.
And getting busy for most of it, it sounds like.
For at least 6 times that I can count. And so it was easy just to put me in front of a TV set because I was, the TV generation. And I fell in love instantly with Tom Jones. So I'd walk around doing my Tom Jones. Loved it. It's not unusual to be loved by anyone. No, right? And of course the Flip Wilson show. And my dad used to laugh because I'd walk around doing Geraldine, like
right.
Look out, killer! Look out, killer! Right? And I'd put on my mom's muumuu and her slippers. My dad would be like, "Oh my God, he's in the muumuu again." But the one show that I absolutely fell in love with was Get Smart. I loved Don Adams' delivery. I loved everything about it. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a performer. Like I knew I wanted to be on TV.
I'm going to jump around here just because I'll forget later. So obviously Buck Henry and Mel Brooks created Get Smart. When we
Yes.
were doing summer school with Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks' best friend, did you
Yes.
talk to him about that at all?
I didn't. I don't remember ever talking to Carl about Get Smart. I did have he did tell me a story about Mel, which really I don't know if I ever even shared this with you, but Carl came up to me off the set and he goes, "You remind me of Mel." And I said, "Why is that?" And he goes, "Because everyone thinks that when you're talking, you're always being funny." And one time after we'd always go to the deli after your show of shows on the Sid Caesar show, and we'd always go to the deli, and Mel would always be telling a story like you're always talking.
Right.
And then one day he was choking on a sandwich, like he had like a pastrami sandwich, Carl told me. And he was going, "Ah, ah, ah," and everyone thought he was doing a bit, and everyone was laughing. Everyone was laughing because they thought he was doing a bit. Then he goes, until we realized, we saw his eyes watering and he's starting to turn blue, that we all just went and just started slapping him on the back. Now, all I got out of that story was, "You remind me of Mel Brooks."
Of course, exactly.
Right.
So you're saying I got a chance.
Yeah.
Well, I tell this story about, we were on, obviously, at the beach and doing summer school. And so Dean and I were on the beach and we were talking, and we were doing that actor thing where you end up talking to each other about like, well, I was working with so-and-so and I
Yeah,
worked with
right.
this
You
guy
dropped
and this
something.
guy. Yeah. And then Carl comes over and he's listening. He's not really participating. And you know how Carl was. He was more normal than most of us,
Yeah.
actually. Even though
We
his
were on the
credits were
set.
insane.
We shot at 9 and we were done by 5 because he wanted to be home for dinner with his family.
Yeah, and so he comes over and he's listening to Dean and I, and he goes, I remember Woody, Danny, and Mel and I were working on a sketch. And he just calmly drops Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, Danny Simon, Neil Simon for, I think it was for, and then, of course it's for your shows.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting way ahead. So let's flash back. You're 12,
Yes.
14 years old.
So I'm
You're
at the
Grant.
I wanted to be on TV, but at the time, I don't know if you realize this, I grew up in the Valley, so everywhere from, Studio City, west were child actors everywhere. And if you remember, because you were a San Fernando Valley guy, weren't you?
Oh yeah, we lived in
Oh, yeah.
Northridge, so we
In
were
Northridge,
way.
I was at your house. I was at the house.
Oh,
that
that's
had
right.
the
That's
pool.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the house. Yeah.
So the valley was populated by two types of families for the most part. There was the aerospace families, which was Lockheed to the east and Rocketdyne to the west, and my family was the aerospace. My family had no concept of how to get me into acting, right? Or they weren't. My mom wasn't about to drive me to auditions. That was the
Right.
big thing, because my mom did not drive the freeway or over the hill through the canyons, as we say in the valley. She wasn't going to drive the thing. So that became the first obstacle we had to overcome. But I was in a play in a community theater, and the creator or the writer of that play was a man by the name of Floyd Huddleston, who had written all the music for the Aristocats for Disney, and
Oh,
he took a
cool.
liking to me, and he said, I want to introduce. He said to my parents, "I want to introduce Richard to my agent," and so my mom was like, "Okay, but I'm not going to drive." So it was back then. It was called the commercial. It was like, what was it called? It was CAA, but not the CAA. It was like Commercial Artist Agency or something like that. I can't remember what it was. I never forget but the Eileen Farrell was my agent. She owned something called the Eileen Farrell Talent Agency, and I was there with Christina Applegate and that whole group. And I instantly started doing commercials. So that's how I got into SAG. I was doing Freshen Up bubblegum commercials. And back then, you're on a national commercial and it's
How
like
old are
you're
you
a
at this
star.
point?
I'm about 10, 11
Well,
years
look,
old.
I mean, I don't want to make too much of it, but you got to. A national commercial is completely different than the way advertising
Back
is
then
now.
it was, yeah.
Back then, you've got 3 networks, and if you had a national, they would run
yeah.
for, what is a cycle? 12 weeks, 3 months?
13
So
weeks
they would,
was the cycle, yeah.
13 weeks. So you'd have a cycle of these ads where they
Yeah.
paid for everything. So they ran these national commercials more. Like, I remember being on, obviously, Little House on the Prairie,
Yeah.
but like Ike did a Doublemint commercial that was on twice as much
yes.
as
In the
as,
movie, I
as
think it's
any
in a
TV
movie
show.
theater, right?
Yeah, he's in a
was, like,
movie theater, and he puts the
Yeah.
puts a piece of gum in his mouth without taking off the wrapper.
Yes.
But I mean, it's like when you're doing a national commercial. I had a national McDonald's, which not only can
Yeah.
you make a ton of money. I think I made around
Oh,
20
boy.
grand back in the day, and that was in the
Absolutely.
70s
Yeah.
for a kid.
I did a bunch of commercials. I started out as a hand model. I don't know if I told you that. So I don't know if you remember this. If you did a toy commercial, you
Okay,
wanted
wait,
to be a
wait.
principal.
Let's see him. Let's see him. Let's see your
They're old
talents.
now. They've got
Very,
age
very nice.
spots on
I
them.
recognize your hand.
Yes, they're all or arthritic now. But
Isn't
back
it
then-
funny that every
Yeah.
picture you take, how do you take a picture when you're playing Invader Zim? It's all about the hand, baby.
Zim. I am Zim. But it's funny because I finally booked a job pretty quickly. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be in this toy commercial. I'll never forget it. It was called Kent and His Cosmic Cruiser. And it was, I don't know if it was for Kenner Toys or something.
Sounds like a pedophile ready to pick
Exactly.
some kid up.
Well, it was like a knockoff Star Wars thing, right? Because we were young and Star Wars had come out, and these kids are playing with it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I get to be like, oh no, it's your hands. When we do the close up of the kid playing with the toy, it's going to be your hands, like, oh. And so eventually I longed to be desired for more than just my hands. And then I started doing a ton of commercials, but you're right. I remember one of my biggest money makers was Freshen Up bubble gum. There's liquid inside this gum, and Chevy Citation and Rustler Steakhouse. So I was doing a crap ton of commercials.
Right.
And that's how I got my card. And then to answer a long-winded way of saying how I got to Richard Stephen Horvitz. Is that the question, or do we move on?
Yeah, but no, that wasn't even the question. The question was like, how young were you when you started? Because I always thought that you were like kind of out of high school, maybe out of college, and then you start. But so you're doing the commercials during high school and stuff. When was your first big theatrical
middle
break?
school? I was still in elementary school when I first started doing this.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I mean, I would always be on you really wanted it. It wasn't a stage.
I really wanted it.
Yeah.
I knew. I mean, I've been fortunate. That's all. I knew what I wanted from a very early age. What's interesting is that I would go on these interviews. I don't know if you remember that. We called them interviews. We never called them auditions.
Yeah.
Your agent would call.
I never knew the difference. I mean,
yeah.
Is it weird to say interview? Because that's for sure.
I still say an interview. I said yesterday to you, I've got an interview, right?
Yeah.
I got an interview.
Yeah.
And my mom used to keep this little book with all your interview, remembering what clothes you wore, what the time was, what the casting house was. Yeah, it was just like, I was totally into it. From a very young age, I could go into a room and not feel anxious at all. I was never nervous about it. I just loved it. But yeah, so I'm in elementary school and I'm doing a ton of commercials, but I hadn't really, I think maybe the only on-camera sitcom I did at that time was Different Strokes. I was on the episode where
wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Dad buys uniforms for the team. And I'd gone on a ton of interviews with Todd Bridges and everyone else. I'm sure I was on them with you at some point and with Moosey, but you guys were the ones booking those jobs. But Todd used to hold court. I'll never forget this. Do you remember when Todd used to hold court? I would walk into it.
Oh, yeah.
Into a room, and he'd be sitting at a chair at the head of the room, and everyone would talk and he'd be like the coolest guy. He'd be like, yeah, man. That's not how things are. And like, what, Todd?
Well, he comes from obviously an entertainment family. His mom, Betty Bridges, was an actress and then a manager. And again, a younger kid in the family, this big family. Yeah. So he had all of this knowledge and he had that attitude of just like walking in and kind of, having this confidence, which again, you need as a kid actor.
Yes.
It's interesting. You say something which is really, I want to point out to people that, always ask me about what it's like being a child actor. There are, and I spoke with this to, I forget, it was another person who was on the pod who said, the kids that didn't want to be in the show, it was Glenn Scarpelli. Glenn Scarpelli said, kids that didn't want to be in the show, didn't want to be in the movies were the ones that had the most obvious bad stories and drugs and all the other stuff because they're being forced to do something that they didn't want to do. And you just said that when you'd never have any nerves or anything going in. And I totally agree. It was just sort of like, that's your time to like goof off and be silly and do a character and do whatever it is you're doing. That was the kind of fun thing. Go in and try to get this audition, get this, job.
Yeah.
And kind of goof around. That's what I loved about it. And also the big, like you say, the rooms, hanging out with a bunch of other kids like that.
Yeah.
Did you see that movie Licorice Pizza?
Yeah, I loved Licorice Pizza. Licorice Pizza was, where they put Tail the Cock restaurant wasn't accurate, to be honest with you. But yeah,
it wasn't.
And Licorice Pizza wasn't accurate either, but that's fine.
No, but I did think that what was great is the agent that he meets, Mary Grady, who is a real agent.
Mary Grady.
Oh,
yes.
my God. I don't know. I never met Mary Grady, but every agent that I met was like that lady.
Absolutely.
And that was a great version of it. And it was also a great kind of realization of kind of what it was like in that time period.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're on Different Strokes, which at all points was a huge show.
Yeah.
Where were they shooting at that point? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to circle back to something you said about like, I would say the only adverse side effect I had as a kid, which is still kind of with me today that I still fight, is that if I had a callback and it was on a Friday or any day, I would spend days in my head going, oh, please, please, God, let me get this. Please, please, God, please, please. I mean, I couldn't stop obsessing in my head. And, I'm 10 years old, like, oh God. And I always had the same shirt I always wore for, you always had the outfit that you wore on auditions. And I was like, oh, please, please, God, please, please.
But was it after or before the audition?
It was after the callback.
See that I just talked about this in one of my short stories, which is the final 5 o'clock Friday audition.
Yeah.
Where
it's
go in,
you and 3.
It's a network and you don't have any news and there's no internet, there's no phones, there's nothing.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there in your room by yourself
waiting for the phone to ring from your agent. And it's a horrible thing to do for a kid, because you should be outside and you're trying to play and have fun, but your mind always comes back to
You're pacing back and forth, smoking your Pall Malls, waiting for the
exactly,
call.
and shooting hoops or skateboarding. That was big. I was a skateboarder, but and they would always be like, "Be careful, don't fall. Like you might get this job."
My mom wouldn't let us go in the sun if we got a call back because you don't want to get a tan.
Exactly. But I always envied people like you and Ike and Moosey because you guys were booking the jobs. I wasn't booking the big jobs. And but you're right, the money from commercials. I stored up so much money from those commercials back in the day that I paid for my own braces. I paid for all doctor bills for me. I bought furniture for my parents. I paid for my own college, of which I dropped out. After one quarter at UCLA.
But that's the thing. The one aspect that I really like about acting, and still to this day, is we're really old men, and we're still here. We can still work, and we can work when we're 80 or 90 or however to the last day of our life. We could be in something because it's the one kind of thing, one kind of job that actually they talk about ageism, but we were when you're hired as a kid actor on a commercial, like ones you're doing, you're paid exactly the same amount as the adult actors.
Absolutely.
And so it's not like you're making kid wages. You were making a full actor's rate with residuals and all that stuff.
And it was exhausting. It really was. You'd come off a day on the set and you'd go home. I remember I would come home and I would be really tired. I might have played it up a little bit because my mom became sort of a kind of a stage mom. Would go, let him rest. Let him rest. He's tired. He had a very busy day.
We had the idea that like if you got a job, you didn't have to do your chores, which can then rapidly metastasize into I am God and I will control everything because I got a job, which doesn't really work.
My treat each week, when I worked, my treat each week was licorice pizza. I got to go and pick out like my favorite 45. And I remember my first one was Chick-a-Boom by Daddy Dewdrop. Chick-a-boom, chick-a-boom, don't you just love it? Heartbeat, it's a love beat was a
By the
big
DeFranco
one.
family.
The DeFranco family.
Yeah.
And I was such a DeFranco family. I found out that Ken Olant was friends with Tony DeFranco.
Really?
And so I contacted Tony because I had this idea for a show at one point, and Tony was like the nicest guy in the world. You know, he still is. They were talking about, I think it was like the 50th anniversary of Heartbeat, It's a Love Beat, and they were talking about doing like a concert and who would go, and I was like, first one to chime in, me.
Yeah, I will.
So, yeah. But anyway,
Okay, so you're doing all of this stuff. What would be your first success? Because actually, there's a good question in here. I know what it's like working as a kid, and you're saying that me and Moosey and this other and Ike were getting all the jobs.
mhm.
Um, I think it's mainly because of luck, timing, and geography. There's really no variation of talent in all the people you're talking about. We're all
Yeah.
different, of course.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
I think when I was young, I was somewhat jealous. I'll be honest. I
Uh-huh.
was jealous about it. I think, like I said, being the youngest of 6, I was like desperate for attention. I think that I was like one of these, you know me, I'm like always kind of on. I always was on when I was young.
Yeah.
And it was like I was on, going, like me, you know? But what happened was I focused on school, which I did pretty well at, but did not enjoy. I was not a good student, but I did well. I got by,
Mhm.
and I made it look like I was good at school.
How very Ekian of you.
Very Ekian of me. And then I booked my first equity production. It was Oliver at the Aquarius Theater. You remember the Aquarius Theater on
Yeah, it used
Sunset
to be the
near where
Carol Theater, then it was
Yeah.
Nickelodeon on Sunset, and
now
I think it's back
and then
to
it
being
became the All
Aquarius,
That Theater, and
right?
it was right near the Music Plus around the corner on Vine.
Uh-huh.
And the minute I stepped on stage, I didn't know it until that moment when I was in this big equity production with Shani Wallace, who had starred as Nancy in the 1968 Oscar-winning musical Oliver, and directed by Anna White, who was the 1968 Oscar-winning choreographer of Oliver, and Stubby K, who was in the original
Whoa.
Guys and Dolls, right? And Dick Shawn. I mean, I'm throwing out names that a lot of people may or may not
is
remember.
like, yeah, I mean, he's an amazing talent.
He was amazing.
He went the right way. He died on stage.
Exactly. And I saw that show, not the show he died on or in, but that
production.
show.
Yeah.
It was at the Beverly Theater on Cannon, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved musical theater, and I thought to myself, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to go to Broadway. I want to be a musical theater. I was taking tap dancing lessons, and so I was a dancer, and I thought this is what I was going to do. But as a child actor, when you're making money in commercials and TV, the agents aren't going to send you to New York to do a play for 8 months where you're not making the money they're making off of you in commercials and TV. So, and my parents weren't going to uproot their life, but it always was my dream to do Broadway. The irony is I'm doing a show right now. I'm voice directing a show right now called Hazbin Hotel, and it stars the biggest names on Broadway, like Alex Brightman, who played Beetlejuice, and James Iglehart, who won the Tony for Aladdin, and Erica Henningsen, who was in Mean Girls. So I kind of get my fix because I get to sing with them during the sessions, but I still want to be on Broadway one day, except I don't know. Oh, I just fell off my chair. I want to be on Broadway still, but I don't know that I could handle 8 shows a week at my age. It's exhausting. So,
I'm sure that you would find a way to start, and then your body just adjusts as you learn. Because again, as we know, like you said, even as a kid, you come home exhausted because we're always on. You gotta learn. And like when we'll get to the TV show that you did, which was one of those shows where they did like 400 episodes every season. But when you're doing a TV show, you got to pace yourself. It's a marathon versus a movie.
Absolutely.
With Alex Brightman and them, are you directing in person, or is it all over?
So when I'm in New York, I try to take a week out of the season that we're recording. So we're on Amazon, so it's not really a season as we know it. It's 9 episodes, 6, 7, 8, 9 episodes. I try to go for a week to New York and try to record all the New York actors. And then the LA actors, the LA cast members, I record in person at the studio. And then the ones we have to do after like their schedules didn't allow for the regular schedule, I do it via Zoom. And I do it on
that's great.
Zoom, and they're the
We
studio.
got to circle back to that because I had no idea you were directing. I got to talk to your 14-year-old. I want to talk to your 14-year-old person here, and I have a great statistic that might make him feel really, really good. Where is it?
Or
Here,
old.
I've got it in my notes. Okay, so this is for your 14-year-old. This is a crazy stat I found on your IMDb.
Go back. Go ahead.
I have 65 acting credits. Okay. I'm a pretty badass. I've been acting since I'm 3 years old.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
been knocking it out.
You played
Nick
Kevin in
Cage.
summer school.
I played Kevin. You might have seen it in summer school. Nicolas Cage has 125 acting credits. So we know Nicolas Cage paying off, the mansions and, the meteorites
and the
crocodiles.
pyramid, what do you call it? Tombs in New Orleans.
Right. Yeah, they cost a lot. So I've got 65 credits. Nick Cage has 125 credits. Richard, you have 224 acting credits. You have over. I have over 300 hours on television. You must have thousands of hours in television programming.
The majority of those obviously are voiceover. However, there are shows that I did. I recently started digitizing my old VHS tapes of like my old demo reels and everything. Well, that's not on IMDb. That's not on IMDb. That's not on IMDb. Right?
I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, there are shows that I did. Weird Science. I didn't even remember, not the movie, but the TV series.
Right, the TV
I
show,
totally forgot that I had done that. Which is nice. That's a nice problem to have, to forget that you had worked. You know what I mean? Otherwise I'd be like, just holding on to that one thing, which was summer school for me for a long time, which we will get to.
We'll be back after these messages. Hey there, my name is Patrick Labyorteaux, and I play an actor on TV. And I also have this acting school called Working Actors School. And what we do there is we teach people to act using Zoom. So you can take an acting class with me and with a person in Connecticut, in Florida, and San Diego all at the same time, thanks to the miracle of Zoom. And I'm very excited to announce that we have a brand new class called Adult Weekly Class. Now, what is that? Now, that's a class that'll meet every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, and you come in and you have an hour-long acting class with other students. It's very, very simple, very, very fun. So if you've ever wanted to be an actor or try it or just mess around, these classes are great. So the Adult Weekly Class is going to be every Wednesday at 5:30 Pacific. Now, come and check it out. It's going to be really fun. Go to workingactorschool.com. Check out the website. You can sign up for the class there. If you need any other information, there's a phone number and an email on the website. You can get it there. And we would love to have you come and try. Talk to you soon. Act 2, Success. So, right before summer school, you were on a TV show called Safe at Home.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us and to the audience and to me the production idea of those shows at the time and what it was like working on it and a little bit about that show?
This is a running joke with me and Dean Cameron. I don't know if he told you this, but I said to him, well, I was doing a show at the time. He goes, Safe at Home? I'm like, yeah. He goes, love that show. Did you ever see it? Never even heard of it, he says, right? So to answer your question, I was going to UCLA. I was a theater arts major. I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. I hadn't gotten housing. I had horrible acne. It was just a horrible time in my life. And I didn't even get housing, and it was just miserable. And I got an audition. So I got an audition for this company called the Arthur Company. And the Arthur Company is famous for having rebooted every show we grew up on. They did the new Munsters. They did 240 Robert with Dick Van Dyke's son. They did New Adam 12, on and on. So I almost didn't make it to this audition. I'll never forget it. It was like just before Christmas, 1984 84 going into 85. And I was using a Thomas guide to get to this audition. And I could not find it. I'm going to be late. I pull into a gas station. At 18 years old, I call up my mom. I'm like, I can't find this place. I'm still calling my mom, right? She just calm down, ask the gas station guy. The guy goes, yeah, it's right across the street. I'm like, okay, thanks. So I go in there.
This is why I don't go over the hill, Richard.
Exactly. This is why I don't go over the hill. I can't tell you where it is. So I go in and I'm like, kind of like just like really tense, but I go, okay, whatever. And I think that's probably what helped me get it. And I played this character on it called Gary Van Sickle. And the show is, to answer your question, this company, the Arthur Company, they had a deal at the time with Ted Turner. And before it became TBS, it was called WTBS, Ted Turner Superstation, WTBS. Right. And Arthur Anacarico had gone to Ted Turner and said, I can make a series for you for $250,000 an episode, which, if you know TV, is nothing, right? $250,000 an episode is nothing. I mean, the shows we watch today are like $1 million minimum an episode. $250,000 an episode. So Arthur pocketed 200 of it and did the series for 50,000 per episode. And so we ended up doing 103 episodes in 3 years, which is unheard of. Unheard of.
So in a season, like back in the day when they would do a full, real, honest to God television season, like Little House.
Yeah.
22 to 24 episodes
26.
A season, right?
Exactly.
And so in 5 years, you'll have 100 episodes, which will be for syndication.
Yep.
So for you to do it in 3 years, you're doing 2 episodes a week?
We're doing an episode a week with no hiatus.
Okay. Wow.
That was the first problem.
And I would imagine you were on some sort of weird SAG bent to the knee and some weird cable contract where you got a sandwich and a coffee and a bucket.
Where they didn't have to adhere to actual hiatus times. Because, for people who are listening that don't know hiatuses, if you do 13 episodes, you get several months off in between seasons, right? And that gives you time to go do a movie or do something else besides just the series. Or sleep. So after the first 13 episodes, we had our first hiatus, which was 2 weeks. And we thought, yay. And then we never got hiatuses again. And then that was the beginning of the revolt.
What was the show about? You played a stage manager, but I've never seen the show.
So I played... So the series was about an ex-football player. Keeping in mind, it's called Safe at Home. So you would think he'd be an ex-baseball player. But he played... so there was an ex-football player and his best friend, his running back, the character's name was Roger. And he was, I don't remember, it was Michael Cutt. My friend Michael J. Cutt played Dan's... God, I did this for years, and you start to block things out after almost 40 years. Dan Ford. He played Dan Ford, and my friend Gary Hudson played Roger Kyle. And Dan Ford was now a sportscaster in retirement at this news station. I was the stage manager for the show because my uncle owned the studio. So I'm like this. And this is where I started talking like this. So everything was like, and clear, Dan. And I got stuck in that voice. In that voice.
You got stuck in the voice by casting, or you got stuck as
I got stuck doing it for so long that it worked for things like Summer School. If you listen to Alan Ekian.
Yeah, of course.
I imagine there was some sort of a baby mix-up at the hospital. That became it's like an Alice Ghostly. All these current references.
I tell exactly. All the kids love the show.
All the kids love.
And so that's why I ask: was it something that you became a part of, Richard?
Yes.
Or was it just on a profession? So it did.
Well, the thing is that there's no denying I have a distinct voice. Like my voice, didn't match my looks, which is one of the reasons why on-camera work became, fewer and far between in bookings. It would always come down to me and somebody else, and it'd be that final callback, me and somebody else, and the somebody else would always book it because the feedback was always, he doesn't sound like he looks. It always reminds me of, like, I would have been great in silent movies. I would have loved silent movies because now when I have an on-camera commercial, as much as I mean on-camera audition, I do my best to try to stay out of my head and go, lower your voice or talk like this, because I did that. You know, I went to Robert Easton to learn how to talk
Wow,
like this.
the
right?
dude, yeah.
The dude who basically came to my house, asked me to make a cup of tea and go, you know, try just lowering your voice here. So for like a year, I walked around talking like this. But as you know, that's not me. That's not me. It's not my voice.
No.
So anyway, back to
Okay.
the show. So I was doing Safe at Home. And by the time I got to, you know, I don't know, episode, I don't know, there was a season after I left the show. So 103. So I'd probably say it was around 60 or 70, episode 60 or 70. Things had gotten really bad on the set. People were unhappy. People were, you know, not showing up for work and everything. And I made the decision that I'm going to book on this next hiatus. I have a 2-week hiatus. I've got to get out of this place. And it just so happened on that hiatus, summer school happened. And I remember the day I went to read for summer school. I was in my, I had a brand new 1985 Mustang GT 5.0 convertible, and I was living in the Hollywood Hills, and I was tooling down the canyon roads, you know, blaring, I don't know, Springsteen's, you know, Born in the USA on the radio. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get this job. So I was pumped.
Yeah.
And what I had known about it was that my agent at the time, Bornstein Bogart, said they're having trouble casting this character of Alan Ekian. So I didn't know what to expect. I walked into the room, and there's Carl, and there's Mark, and they're reading with me. I'm like, wow.
Which is not usual. You usually
Not
go, if
usual
even
at
producers, you usually have a couple of producers that are the producers, but you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But with Carl Reiner, he's obviously Carl Reiner, and Mark
He's Carl
Harmon is
Reiner,
the sexiest man in America.
and along with
Literally
the
that
sexiest
year.
man.
Yeah.
Which we used to tease him about mercilessly. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
But Carl read with me, and like before I even finished, he threw down the script and goes, "Get out of here! You're perfect." So that's what he said. "Get out of here! You're perfect." By the time I got home, I'd gotten the offer for Alan Ekian for summer school. The problem was this: I was not aware that I was under an exclusive contract with Safe at Home at the Arthur Company that did not allow me to get out of the contract to do the movie.
So you're thrilled and excited. When did you get the notice that like, there may be a problem with your contract with the Arthur Company?
As soon as I got the job, my manager at the time called, because my agent got the booking, called my manager. My manager called me and said, well, we have a problem. I said, oh, I also, at the very same time, I was cast in, what was I cast? I was cast in Police Academy 3 or 4. I can't remember which one it was. And so that was the first issue. You have to decide which one you want to do, Police Academy 3 or Summer School.
Wow, it's so weird that happens. So what was your choice? We know what was your choice.
It was, believe it
we
or
know the
not,
choice, but what was the thought process?
The thought process was how big is my part in each one, you know, and that, of course, that's what I always think. But then I thought, this is a no-brainer. This is, you know, Carl Reiner. And as a kid, like I said, growing up watching the Dick Van Dyke Show and all the rest of those shows and reruns, I said this, and please, Carl Reiner had done The Jerk.
Canada,
yeah, and they had done
Steve
The Jerk. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And Mark
was that Fern Champion who was the casting person on that one?
Yeah. It was
Penny Perry
Champion
for
Basque.
Okay.
Champion Basque casting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I read for what's his name over at you know, the big one that was on Beverly. You remember he was like the casting person. He casted everything. He cast everything. I hate when people say cast.
Lynn Stallmaster?
Lynn Stallmaster. That was huge. Lynn Stallmaster. Because Lynn also had like, I had never shot out of the state. I was like, oh, Lynn's doing things in New York. I want to go to work in New York. That's how I thought. But that was the first problem. And it was a good problem to have. Yeah. So I opted for summer school. And so they start to go into negotiations with Paramount for me. And one of the things that you bring in is, well, he's already on a series. He's already making this much money. So that helps with how much money you get paid. Because remember the days when we had quotes. Remember
Right.
quotes? What's his quote?
Yeah.
What's his weekly quote?
Yeah.
And
Over a
then the next
period of
problem.
working, you build up a little bit more, a little bit more. So there's
Exactly.
scale, which is the basic rate, but you go, well, he's worked, so he gets this much above scale,
Exactly.
is your quote.
Exactly. And also it used to be like, I'm jumping around here, but these things that used to be like the quote is like you could do a guest star on some network sitcoms, and within a couple of years you were a regular on a series because they knew you, and
Right.
so you kind of kept building to that, and it doesn't work
Exactly.
that way at all anymore. But anyway, so the next problem was, as I was saying, is I was under contract exclusivity for Safe at Home, and so they were not going to let me out. They just were not going to do it. They weren't going to do it, and I'm like just
Out of
heartbroken over it.
spite or what? Or just
Because
the
they
schedule, like they
could,
couldn't
because
take?
they could, and
Okay.
remember I told you by this time everything was really emotional on the set. People were unhappy and everything, so why not
Yeah.
keep them unhappy? And so my manager came up with this brilliant idea that is not brilliant. That's a sarcastic statement. He said you could declare bankruptcy. I said, I'm 20 years old. I'm not gonna declare bankruptcy at 20. You know, that's ridiculous. Finally, we came to an agreement with the Arthur Company, and the agreement was this: I would have to pay for a guest star every week that I was off the show shooting the movie.
Oh my God.
And so I would meet with Arthur every week, and I'd hand him a check that I'd written myself to cover the cost of a guest star. And some weeks there
It's
wasn't even a
scale,
guest
I
star.
hope.
Yeah, but some weeks there wasn't even a guest star. But Paramount knew this, and they upped my weekly on Summer School to cover some of it. But it wasn't that much. I mean, you know what we were making.
Was
back in
there
those days.
any discomfort or anger or anything that you had about your agents and managers who had sent you on the audition without understanding the exclusivity of it? Or was that always a known?
I never had any kind of animosity at this age towards my agents and managers. That
Save
happened.
that for now.
that was at that time. No, I just kind of was going with the flow. I mean, you know, in the 80s, I was kind of on a roll because I'd gotten another movie while I was doing summer school, but I was able to shoot that movie at night. So that was hell. It was a movie called
Wait,
Thrashin.
you were shooting a movie? You were shooting Thrashin while we were shooting summer school?
No, I was shooting after we'd done summer
Safe
school.
at
I
Home.
got booked. I mean, yeah, Safe at Home. So I
Okay.
would do Safe at Home during the day, which, you know, those days are long. You know, between the
Yeah.
rehearsing and the camera blocking and all
Because
the
it was a
rest of it.
3-camera show, but I don't think you guys had an audience, did you?
We did have an audience. We had a
Oh, you
Friday
did?
night
Okay.
audience. We did, and I love that. That was obviously my favorite part.
Yeah.
But I was shooting a movie called Thrashin, where I played the jouster with Josh Brolin was in this movie, and it's if you've never seen it, I shot for like weeks at night, and in it I play the jouster, and I'm on a skateboard and I'm jousting because I was a skateboarder. I really was. I skated ramps and pools, and I think we talked about this when you and I were younger. But they invite me to the screening. I invited all my friends and family, and I was completely cut from the movie. They didn't tell me this. Still get residuals though,
Of
of
course,
the 3
no,
cents.
yeah, you get your daily, yeah, of course, because
But yeah,
Gleaming
it
the
was
Cube ate your lunch.
that was the
But it was
first
the- it was-
time I ended up on the cutting room floor. That was the first time.
So, okay, let's get to summer school. So you
Yeah.
get this part, you get summer school. I remember, I think you were the very last person to be a part of the
Yes.
the whole
Yeah,
thing.
that's you
Go
had
ahead.
a rehearsal. You had a blocking rehearsal with Carl, and I wasn't there because I was still under contract and I had to fulfill a certain amount of episodes before they let me go. And I'd finished my last episode, so I missed like I don't know. I think I
It was
missed
a
a week
week.
of rehearsal.
Yeah, we had 1 week at Paramount where it was, which was funny because we never shot anything at Paramount. It was all on location. But
All
we had 1
location.
week at Paramount on a stage where they had taped out all the different sets,
Yeah.
and then we rehearsed it with Carl Reiner and all the
Yeah.
kids and everything. And then when we started shooting, everyone got to meet you.
Yeah. That was awkward for me, to be honest with you. I felt awkward, and like I said,
What was that
never
like? Yeah.
nervous. I felt like I had missed out on like the initial bonding element of it.
Sure.
I think I'm trying to remember the table read we did at Paramount. Because I think that table read was either before we started shooting and after the blocking, or we did the table read, then you guys did the blocking.
I
Do you
think we
remember?
did. I think we did the table read first, then the blocking.
Yeah, so I was at the
Yeah.
table read, and I'll never forget this. I'll speak out of summer school here. I loved Kirstie Ally. She was great, but it was during the time of those Molson Golden ads or whatever it was, where the woman would overlap the guy's dialogue. Do you remember
Right.
those commercials?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was Molson Golden, but something like that. And that's what she was doing at the table read. Nobody could get their lines out because she would overlap Mark or she would overlap somebody else. And I remember Dean and I have talked about this a million times. Like, hey, can we talk here? Do you remember that at all?
I don't remember that so much as I remember it was so, we shot Little House at Paramount.
Yeah.
And so going back to Paramount for me, I was in my own little journey of having now gotten a movie that was a real life movie at a studio. And I felt like I did it. I moved on from being a kid actor. Now I'm a teenage actor, which
We
I
all
then would
thought
then
that.
later do with, And I think it was such a big deal that I was open to, I've always been kind of like, I kind of ignore those types of things,
Yeah.
not because I decide to ignore them, just because they kind of go over my head. Different actors do different things. But I remember thinking you were hysterical. And then when you came back on set, like what Carl Reiner was saying, that you were always a joy to be around.
I don't know about that. I don't know that Dean felt that. I know that Courtney didn't think about that at the time. Because
well, Courtney is, it's like of all the summer school people, I haven't seen Courtney. And again, I'm not talking bad about her, but it's just definitely it's sort of like felt like Courtney was not part of that deal for some whatever reason.
It was weird. It was weird. And if you see the poster that's right behind me, that's our summer school picture, right?
Oh yeah, that's us on the beach.
They gave us at the rap party, and everyone signed it. And Courtney had written on mine, I know on set we were opposing forces, but what you didn't know is that I was secretly laughing at everything you were saying and doing. And I'll tell you a story. There's so much.
Comedians love that, by the way.
But I will tell you a story about summer school and Mark Harmon years after, but you have to remind me to get back to it because it's a great story. But that's what Courtney had written. And at the time I was always on, but we're like 20, 21 years old and we're young guns, like kind of gunning for Carl's attention and gunning for ideas, like playing, like playing Simon Says, and we shoot that, because we played Simon Says off the set, and Dean and I were always like, it's like, I think Dean and I were just kind of like this unspoken. Does that make sense? It was an unspoken competition in a way. He might not have felt the competition, but I did. The irony is
it was what you're talking about. I call it, or I understand it in my head as that actor competition of getting the last laugh or getting the better joke.
That's what it was.
I see it a lot in the writer's room. When I'm in a writer's room, it's very similar. But yeah, definitely. And Dean was definitely he was always, in my mind, I told him this on our conversation.
Yeah.
If there was a method actor on summer school, Dean was the method actor.
Yeah, definitely. He had studied with Peggy Fury too, which is where Sean Penn had come from and everything. And Dean, still to this day, we laugh because, Dean, you and me, we're all close. Dean and I have done a ton of stuff together just for fun in the last, 6 or 7 years, or maybe even longer now, 10 years. But, we did that, some kind of joke that we did during the pandemic.
Yeah, you did that. You did the bug, a short film.
Yeah, we did the bug.
You did other, some kind of laugh. It was a lot more complicated than just the jokes. You guys were doing.
Yeah, we shot things. We actually.
Jerk-ass fireman.
Yeah. Oh God, it was, what was that? It was like that. It was something fireman. God.
You should post that. That would play really well this week.
It was, yeah, exactly. But of course now there's a TV series. It's the exact same concept. But when we shot those things, it was all improv. We did them like, and it was fun. We did that. Not dumbass fireman. He'll kill me that I don't remember. Anyway,
Right.
but I remember that about Dean. But that's the funny thing. I look at Dean like that old. I don't know if it was John Cougar Mellencamp song or something where like we used to fight when we were young and now we just sit around, reminiscing about those days. And that's
Yeah.
what it's like with Dean. It's like we're really close and you're close with Dean. And
Yeah.
I love these days better than I love those days because we were also like the bastard children of like the Breakfast Club kids, the Rat Pack, because we were
Right.
at the same age as all of them. And we thought this was our shot.
Absolutely. And in some way, because of Paramount and everything and the release that we got and
the
everything,
strike.
it's not, but it's not that crazy to look at that and say, I mean, we were one job away. We were one break away from being any one of those kids.
Yeah.
And the struggle is real. I mean, as far as you and I are talking now, we are working actors. As far as that goes, that's great. I really do, find the joy in that. But, everyone says, oh, you were a child star. It's like, no, I was a child character actor. I was never really, a star.
Can I tell the story of how I met you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think this is probably one of my favorite stories of all time. So
it's one of mine too.
It's one of my favorite stories is, so in the movie, we pay homage to Rick Baker, and there's a reason for that because Rick Baker, uncredited, by the way, did our makeup.
He didn't do a credit for that? Oh my God.
Did all of our makeup at his studio for the slasher scene where we come and for the rabbit scene where Dean and Gary come out.
Right.
With
All the chainsaw and Dave
all the
makeup
chainsaw stuff. I had a blade in my head. And you had a great thing. My thing didn't work out as great. I'll tell you why about that. But so we go in and we do a full face mask and they cover our entire head in this plaster to make a mold of our face. And all they have are like little holes for eyes and a straw in the nose so you can breathe. So if you're claustrophobic, this sucks.
Forget about it. Yeah.
First thing happens, I walk into Rick Baker's place, and the first thing that comes out at you is the wolf from American Werewolf in London, which was in the thing, which I was like, oh my God, I'm in heaven. I'm still like a little fanboy at this time. So I'm in the chair, and I was up at some hour, and we had an hour in between calls. And while I'm in the chair with full plaster on and nostril, straws and two little eye holes, in walks Patrick. And I go with this face full of plaster. I go, Andy Garvey. And you like look at me like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah, but you got to remember, you're in a face full of plaster, so all I hear is
Andy Garvey. And I begin, when I finally get the plaster off, I start telling Patrick every single one of my favorite episodes of Little House, and how do you feel that you burned down, that you were responsible for burning down? Whose house did you burn? You burned down.
I burned down our barn.
You burned down the barn, yeah.
And Matt, my brother, who has played Albert, he burned down the blind school. But that's all another story.
You guys
lots
are burning.
Of fires.
Yeah, but I told every single I said, oh, I loved what was the spinoff series that you guys did, the Olsen, the Garvey series. You did a pilot.
Oh, there was an episode. We did a pilot called A New Beginning where
that was it.
Jonathan Garvey goes to town and becomes sheriff.
Yes. And I was so blown away that Andy Garvey was there. And to this day, I still talk about Andy Garvey. I still do.
I was so funny because it was like that. You walk in and it's not like, oh, there's a replica of the werewolf. It's the werewolf. It's like all the real things that this guy did. And I'm a big, huge fan of makeup and all of those things. And so I'm looking around and I hear this out of the corner, this guy in this head full of plaster. But I mean, from that very moment, it was like everyone was really happy. The experience, I experienced it with, and you talk about the Arthur Company not being a great set. Little House was a great set because of Michael. I
Yep.
think obviously Summer School was a great set because of Carl, but he also
Mhm.
had Mark Harmon. If he had a
Mark was
star that
great.
was not like the type of guy that Mark Harmon is, Mark Harmon
Yeah.
is, I call him a union guy because he's always reminds me of the guy that like would be organizing a union because he's all about, well, what's fair for the crew. I don't
Yep.
like it because it's not fair for the crew. Um, so between Carl and Mark, it was a really chill set.
It was really
Kirstie
chill.
was a shot of chaos and was hysterical. And then you
Ugh,
had us kids.
yeah.
And so my experience with summer school was totally professional, loved every moment of it, loved all the people. What was you said you had a story about Harmon?
So my experience on summer school
Yeah.
is that it was a great time. There were times that I felt not included in the group, like things like the Nike sneakers. That's a perfect example that everyone was getting these new Nikes because Mark had
Uh-huh.
said, if you go to Nike, they're one of our people were doing product placement for, so they'll give you free Nikes, and everyone got free Nikes, and I didn't. Did you know about that? Did you get free Nikes?
I absolutely. I think I wore a Nike half shirt for like 3
Yeah,
years in 16
never
magazine.
got any of those things, so I felt like kind of like on
Did
the
you call?
outside.
Did you like go and
I, you
try to
know,
get it?
I just kind of felt on the outside for a long time, meaning I still had a
Uh-huh.
blast, but
Right.
I think that as someone who's anxious by nature, I'm like anxious and neurotic. I think that was one of the reasons I was constantly always on. And I think that in a lot of ways, Carl responded to that because I'm very much the shticky, Sid Caesar, Borscht Belt type of joker.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's because I was playing the nerd, and I think people forget. Back then, it wasn't cool to be a nerd. Everyone like lets their freak flags fly freely now. Everyone's, oh yeah, I'm a
Right.
D&D nerd. Oh, I'm a Marvel nerd. But I was always being cast as the nerd, and I longed to be something more than just the nerd. But I got along famously with Kirstie and Mark and everybody. I got along with everybody, but Kirstie, I used to read her auditions with her in her trailer. Like, can you come read these with me? And I would, and I'd help her with her auditions and stuff. Mark and I would take a walk like weekly or daily,
Uh-huh.
rather, almost down to that 7-Eleven that was near the school we were shooting at, the Shoop on Shoop. His
That
name
was
was
the
Shoop.
weird, just a weird thing.
Yeah,
His name was Shoop. It was on Shoop, and the name
yeah,
of the school was Hughes Junior High, where they
yeah,
shot kid movies
yep,
during the reign of John Hughes. So it's like how many
exactly.
weird.
So we would go down there, and I would sit in Mark's trailer with him. We would talk because I was still under contract for the Arthur Company. As soon as I finished shooting the movie, I was going back to um, that series again for Safe at Home. And I remember Mark saying to me, "You got to get out of television. You got to get out of television." I'm like, he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I left St. Elsewhere. You got to do it. Film. You're in film now. Take your break." And so I had my managers negotiate me out of the um, the contract. They finally were able to let me go from the contract. And
Mhm.
then the Writers Guild strike hit the same time that our movie was released. And we were kind of forgotten by the time the movie came out. And
Yeah,
it
no
wasn't the breakneck
momentum. Yeah.
we all thought it would be. And now I didn't have that, and I didn't have my series anymore. But the Arthur Company did hire me back to do like the first 13 episodes of The Munsters Today, which was a reboot on video with John
That was
Shock and
the
Lee
240
Merriweather.
Robert reboot, which is
Exactly.
weird. Again, safe at home about
Exactly.
football, and
So let me
240
tell you the
Robert
story
about
about
monsters.
exactly. Let me tell you the story about Mark. So
Yeah.
years later, um, I I couldn't get arrested on camera. I just couldn't. I mean, here and there I do some spots on TV shows, like, I did Head of the Class, where I played Oswald Bletch, and it was still the nerd. It was just another
Right.
rendition of Alan Ekian. I did that. You Can't Take It With You, a show called Baby Boom with Kate Jackson. So I was getting
Uh-huh.
guest spots here and there, but they were becoming fewer and far between. And then remind me to come back because that's how I got into voiceover. But so years later, I'm at my desk and an email pops up and it says, Mark Harmon. I'm like, what? So I click on it, and it's an email from Mark. He goes, Richard, give me a call at the office. And so I called up Mark and I said, hey, Mark, what's going on? He goes, how you been? I said, great. He goes, listen, he goes, this is a weird call, but I'm serious about this. I said, what? And he goes, I'm busy framing. I'm reframing all of my posters and set stuff for my office. And I noticed that when you signed the picture that Carl gave us, that one right there behind us, what you wrote like in a red pen or a pink pen or something, and it's faded. It's faded. And he said, would you meet me in Santa Monica at this frame store and re-sign it for me before I have it framed? I'm like, seriously? He goes, yeah. And I go, well, the funny thing is at that rap party, everyone had signed it, but I had left a space for you to sign, and I missed you. And he goes, bring it. I will sign it. I'm like, okay. So I meet him at the frame store in Santa Monica, and we hadn't seen each other in years. Great big hugs, and he by this time I had mellowed ego wise. I wasn't the obnoxious, always on, at least some people might say, obnoxious, always on, annoying person that I didn't like being when I was young. And so he takes it out of the frame and he goes, I want you just to go over what you wrote, and I want you to write the exact same thing. And I looked at what I had written. And what I had written was, what I had written was, dear Mark, when I was cast in summer school, everyone asked if I would be playing Mark Harmon's younger, better looking brother. I said, Mark, classic. I can't. And he goes, please just write it. I'm like, okay, all right. So then he signed mine, and true to Harmon form, he had written something like, Richard, your energy and inspiration on the set was a joy to behold. Every day you made me laugh. Just something so,
beautiful.
So sickeningly sweet.
Right.
Versus my all about me, right? So the framer frames the picture, right? It puts the frame on, does mine, does his, and then she goes, there we go, all done. And then I go, but wait, I'm still here. And Mark says, what do you mean? I said, well, I thought that once we had both signed them and those have been reframed, I was going to quantum leap back into my on-camera career. But Mark, true to form, says to me, Richard, what are you talking about? I said, Mark, he goes, everyone, it feels like went on to on camera, and I just like died in that world. And he says, are you crazy? He said, first of all, do you know how many films I had to do in Romania and Czechoslovakia just to pay my mortgage? And he goes, you have a voiceover career that my kids watched all your shows and heard you all the time. Your voice was always just sweet as can be. Now,
yeah,
I get home that very day, I was cast in a movie called The Informant, which is right below summer school, right there on the wall there. Boom. With
experimental filmmaker by the name of Steven Soderbergh, and
a little experimental filmmaker. So it was Tony Hale and I played Matt Damon's attorneys in a true story of Mark Whitaker, and who's also in it? Scott Bakula. So I write
quantum leaping into your on-camera career. Holy shit!
So I write to Mark and I write, oh my God. Thanks to your magic signature, I literally today just got cast in The Informant. And true to Mark Harmon form, he says, Richard, I believe rather it's your talent and courage as an actor, blah, 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 more than my signature. But I've seen Mark several times over the years. He's always very sweet.
I've seen Mark a couple of times because of JAG and CIS. I've got to work with them. And he's so funny. We're doing a table read for one of these episodes, and he threw in the line where, like, I walk in and his character Gibbs is there, and they go, well, do you know do you know Lieutenant Roberts, which was my character on Jag?
Yeah.
And Gibbs has this line like, yeah, I've come in contact with him a couple of times. But at the table we were doing, you know, do you know this character name? Do you know this guy by the name of Lieutenant Roberts? He goes, yeah, we went to summer school together.
Was that written in, or did he write
No, he just ad-libbed it. And it's just like, you know, obviously the joke of the table read. But okay, so let's try to do a little bit more of a direct line here, because I've got just
2 hours.
I'm happy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with talking for that long. So you did Deadly Weapon with Kim Walker, who was also in Heathers. And
you were doing
passed
Heathers.
away.
Yeah.
She literally died of a brain tumor, which is one of her favorite lines in Heathers. But
and
they
she
were
was
doing
best
Deadly
friends
Weapon with you.
Yeah. Well, so you're exactly right. You were doing Heathers at the time I did Deadly Weapon or somewhere around. I don't know if you remember. I came to your rap party for Heathers. I think you had invited me, so I was there.
Okay, great.
It was a long time
I don't
ago.
remember. I barely remember anything after that. I was on a very strict diet, so I don't remember much.
Yes. So Deadly Weapon was interesting. I went in to read for this, and it was Kim Walker, it was me, Barney Martin, who played Seinfeld's dad on Seinfeld, and this kid named Rodney Eastman at the time. It was being sold as the new James Dean, right?
Yeah.
And I was, like I said, still feeling really confident in auditioning, and so the character I was supposed to play was the mayor's son. Gary Kroger is also in it. Still one of my dear friends. Gary Kroger from SNL. Hysterical. And the character was supposed to be overweight, like very overweight. So I went in and I stuffed myself.
You're a secret, like ripped dude, though. You were always in great
used to
shape.
Be. I don't know anymore, but I stuffed pillows in to be really overweight, which looked ridiculous, honestly, when you're looking back on it, because my head was this big, but I'm like this, right?
Michelin Man.
Yeah, like the Michelin Man. And I met with the director, and Michael Miner, I think was his name. And he said, you know, we don't have to do the fat thing. You're great. You got the part. So I went and I shot it.
Oh,
and,
great.
it was originally called Deadly Weapon, but because of Lethal Weapon, I think it was changed to Boy with a Ray Gun, which is pretty on the head for the title. Well, I mean,
sure.
But I recently saw it. I had totally forgotten about that. But that was a fun shoot. That was all at night because my character is held hostage in a video arcade by Rodney Eastman's character with my father. And it was just another nerdy, annoying.
And then did you have, was that, my brother did a movie called Deadly Friend. There's a lot of deadlies back in the 80s.
Yeah. But Kim, you know, died not long after that. She died maybe less than 10 years after that. She was like very good friends with Jennifer Aniston. Really good friends with Jennifer Aniston.
I just remember when we were doing Heathers that it was, if you thought that there were cliques on the summer school set, there were defined cliques on the Heathers set that were encouraged because we were all playing the characters and it was just a weird movie. And so she and Christian, I think, were either dating or not dating, but definitely not dating when he started dating Winona. And I mean, literally at high school, it was just high school politics.
It was high school.
It was so funny. It was just,
we were talking about earlier about jealousy and envy. One, I wish I had been in Heathers. That was one that I would have loved to have been in. But you know what I would have loved to have been in? Ski School with you and Dean. That would have been
great. That would have been so much fun.
That would have been so much fun.
We'll be back after these messages. Hey there, my name is Patrick Labyorteaux, and I play an actor on TV. And I also have this acting school called Working Actors School. And what we do there is we teach people to act using Zoom. So you can take an acting class with me and with a person in Connecticut, in Florida, and San Diego all at the same time, thanks to the miracle of Zoom. But we also teach kids. We have a great class called the Youth Weekly class that's every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. And it's for kids. It's for like 10 to 17. And we have a great group of kids right now. and it is ongoing. So if you know someone that wants to get into acting and has never done any acting but would love to try, why don't you have them try starting off with Youth Weekly? Just go to workingactorsschool.com and check us out. It's Youth Weekly every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Act 3, present day. Let's get into the voiceover thing, because I have these notes. Here
Okay.
are some shows, just some of the shows that have more than one, or actually more than 8 episodes that you star in. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Angry Beavers, Invader Zim, Brandy and Mr. Whiskers, Squirrel Boy, Ben 10, El Tigre, The Adventures of Manny Rivera, Betsy's Kindergarten Adventures, Kick Butowski, Suburban Daredevil, The Adventures of Kid Danger, Skylanders Academy, Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure.
Yes.
We'll get into like the big ones, but what's with the word adventure in your resume? There's so many adventures.
I'm all about adventures because kids, it's a buzzword for kids. Adventure. How did I get in? So I got in because, like I said earlier, my on-camera career was like going nowhere. It was very depressing. I'm like, hey, and all I was known for at that time was summer school. No matter what I did, it was always, hey, you're the summer school guy. You're the summer school guy. And I wasn't really booking a lot of on camera, and I was going broke. To be honest with you, I was going broke. I was like, I had cars to pay for and a house to pay for, and now ex-wife to pay for, and I just didn't. I didn't know what I was going to do, and it was my mom. My mom, she said, "Hey, you should do voiceover." I'm like, "What?" She goes, "You should do voiceover." My mom knew nothing about the industry. Even though I was a child actor, she really knew nothing about voiceover work. And so what I did was I listened to my mom like I always did, and I went to my commercial agent. At the time, I was with a commercial agent named Susan Nathy.
Okay.
Susan Nathy, CPC and Associates. And they shared an office, but not a company, with a woman by the name of Sandy Schnarr. Remember Sandy Schnarr Talent?
We know Sandy, yeah.
So I went over to Sandy and I said, hey, I want to do voiceover. And she said, well, you got to do a demo reel. And back then it was a reel. I mean, it was reel to reel.
Of tape, yeah.
Of tape. And I just found it. I just found that my original demo reel.
Oh my God.
And it never made it to the wall of Voicecaster, by the way. But anyway, I made the demo reel, and she said, again, my ego was through the wall, because not only was I not working, it was kind of, don't you know who I think I am? She said, this is great, but you should do classes for animation. I'm like, classes for animation? I don't need classes. Don't you know who I think I am? And so the first month there, I booked 3 commercial spots, 3 radio commercial spots.
Wow.
It's like starting over for me, because I started in commercials. I'm back to commercials. 3 radio spots. And I remember the very first job I booked was for, I think it was a Chevy or a Ford commercial. I had one line, bye, Dad. Bye, Dad. And Sandy like sends me the contract and the script. And I'm like, this is all I say? And she says, honey, the person who has all the announcer lines makes the same money as the guy who says, bye, Dad. I'm like, okay. So back then, this is how naive I was to voiceover. This is how naive it was. Back then, it was like $235 per spot per cycle. Meaning if you did 2 spots, then you made, $500, right? 500, whatever.
13 weeks, yeah.
Yeah. And it was for 13 weeks. And then after 13 weeks, if they pick it up, you get another session payment, which was just another $235. And so this is how naive I was. The very first one, I go, wow, if I do 4 of these a day, 5 days a week, this is really how naive. And I've been in the business for how many years at this point? I can be making, 4 or 5 grand a week. This is great. So I booked 3 spots that month. Never worked again the rest of the year. Never. It took me 5 years to break into animation. 5 years. But I was still supporting myself doing radio commercials. the first animated show I ever did was a thing called The Legend of Prince Valiant. It might have even been The Adventures of Prince Valiant.
Right.
But everyone had done that show. Everyone had been brought on. There was like Rob was on it, Charlie Adler. Anyway, so I remember I'm really bad with names at this point in my life and career, but Stu somebody was someone very famous. Stu,
The
I don't know,
director?
might have to look that up. It was a voiceover director. So
Yeah, he directed us on Spider-Man, and I
Yeah.
remember the name Stu because it's
Stu-
not. I forget the
Stu-
last name. Like
I
you.
can't remember the name, but it was Stu. He had a voice like this.
Stu. Yeah, Stu. We all know
Stu Rosen. Stu Rosen.
There we go. Exactly.
Stu Rosen. There it is. So this show was about pirates, Prince Valiant. They sail the seas, blah blah blah. And I had been hired for a very small part as a ship's like sailor, like it was a ship like pirate ship or something, right? So my first line was like, "Captain, the decks have all been swabbed." And everyone starts laughing. They all start laughing. And I think to myself, wow, I'm really good at this. This is like an ugly duckling coming home to roost. And all of a sudden in the talkback, Stu comes over and he goes, "I didn't realize we hired Woody Allen to be a ship's pirate." And everyone laughed. And I was humiliated. I felt really insecure, very embarrassed. And so I made it my goal from that point on to say, okay, I'm going to be in animation. This is my thing. I'll show you. That was always my motivating factor.
real moment.
It's a real moment. I'll show you. Because like I said, I know it's my own insecurity for having a funny voice and not being tall and short and all that thing growing up, that I said the same thing maybe about like summer school, where I felt like the ugly duckling or the odd man out or just like not included. This was one of those moments again. And I said, I'll show you. And so from then on, I put all my energy into getting animation auditions. And then I finally got the Angry Beavers. And Angry Beavers, well, first I got the Power Rangers, but that was like a dubbing contract. And to answer your question, yes, I started working in loop groups first. Lynn Redding had a loop group. I worked for the Mad Dogs. That's where Ike and I hooked up again, is that Ike was working with
Ike ran Mad Dogs.
He
broke off from Barbara Harris.
And Moosey. I see Moosey.
Yeah, exactly. All of them. My brother, I think, worked with Mad Dogs as well.
Yeah, he did. Yep.
So okay, so
that's where I met. That's where I met Albert Ingalls, and then did the same thing about, hey, when you had the heroin addiction, it wasn't heroin, the morphine addiction. Yes, it was soup. I wasn't really puking.
What he doesn't tell anyone is that it wasn't soup.
Yeah, it was. He was a method actor. He was making himself
He's a method
vomit.
actor. That's my brother, the method actor. When you're focusing in on the characters and stuff, you've had obviously great success, and I want to go through some of this stuff. How do you break down what they do? Is they give you a picture of the character, and then you've got to come up with the voice. They don't tell you what they're looking for. They tell you what kind of person he is. Like Invader Zim wants to take over the world, but they don't say a high-pitched squeal or. So how do you look at it and then make the transition?
So the first
figure out what voice it is.
So the first thing that I realized was that I don't have a huge range. I mean, no matter what I do, it's my voice because I have a distinctive range. But in fact, you always know it's me in everything you hear. Oh, that's Richard Horvitz. And we can do that a lot now. We can pick out Tom Kenny. We can pick out Rob and all that. But back then, I didn't have the range of a Jim Cummings or anything. But it had occurred to me early on that I go to see a Robert De Niro movie, right? And you could argue that Robert De Niro is the same in Goodfellas as he is, as he is in as he is in Casino, as he is in The Irishman, and yet we follow him into that story because he's really good at letting the story be more important than him. Like he lets the story come through, and this was the beginning of me like trying to shed the ego that it's all about me, because I met a great teacher that I can talk about at some other point. But anyway, who had taught me this, that, nothing's more important than story, and that you're either an impressor or an expressor. And I decided in those moments that I was going to be an expresser. So when it came to a show like Invader Zim or Angry Beavers or anything else, I never start with the voice. I always start with a story, like anything. Like even if we're doing on camera, I always start with a story. I find my want in the story. I ask questions about the story. Like, wait a minute, I don't know why I'm saying this here. I gotta figure out why I'm saying this, who I'm saying it to, based on the information given to me. Then the next thing I say is the voice does the work of the spirit of play. So we do voices all the time without even thinking about it. For example, if you see a cute little baby, you don't think to yourself, now what voice shall I use that lets this baby know that I think it's cute? Hello, baby. No, that made it cry. We automatically go, hi, yeah, you're a cutie. I'm going to punch you in the neck, or which is a good dog. That's a good dog. And so, like, when you're a kid on the playground as a kid, you don't go, freeze, Lex Luthor, I'm Superman. You go, freeze, Lex Luthor, I'm Superman. So we've done it all our lives. But, like, I've got, like, a lot of sayings that I keep in my head when I'm working. I don't want to be doing. I want to be being. Doing makes it all about myself, which can distract from the story. And I don't ever want to distract from the story. I want to be part of the story. But I have another saying, when we know why we say what we say, meaning I've asked those questions, I found my want, then we're informed and we're free to play. So now I can do any voice I want to come up with if I come up with a voice. And a lot of people will tell you I do the same voice as Chaos in Skylanders as Invader Zim, and I wouldn't disagree. But my
it's so interesting because when these get uploaded, part of the process is they have an AI that then gives you like show title ideas, which I ignore completely. Yeah. But if I'm the AI, I would sit here and go, the title of this episode is Forgetting Your Ego and Finding Success. I can't get over how important that is to a person that I thought I knew. Was this a big thing? It sounds like it is.
It's a big thing for me. I'll tell you how I came to it. If you have 2 seconds more, I'll tell you. Back in 1994, I guess it was. Like I said, my on-camera career was crap. I wasn't getting anywhere. I had divorced my house. I lost my house and everything. I just lost almost everything. And I didn't know what to do. And I kept going out for auditions that became fewer and far between, mainly because I told my agents I'm no longer going to read for the nerd. And they, you sure? I'm like, yeah. And so I stopped reading for nerd parts. And so my auditions became fewer and far between. Mm-hmm. And when I did get an audition, I started going up on lines. I started screwing up. I started being late. To auditions.
That's weird.
Why, I would walk out of the because I was so desperate. That's what it was. I was bringing desperation into it. And I had made this big stand about I'm not going to be the nerd anymore. And that's important to remember that I said I wasn't going to be the nerd anymore. And so I would walk out of those auditions feeling like crap about myself, treating myself horribly, drinking too much. And eventually there I was in a 1-bedroom apartment, divorced, with not knowing what I'm going to do. And then finally I booked this very low budget film shooting in Romania just after the fall of communism. But I'm like, yeah, that takes me out of this hellhole, and I had a stack of bills to the ceiling. I was broke. And so I went to Romania, and it just so happens that, by the way, I knew nothing about Romania other than they had a great, gymnastics team. I knew Nadia Comaneci and Olga Corbett. And so I went there with a trunk full of SpaghettiOs, Hershey bars, and water tablets. Like, at least I'm not going to starve. But when I get there, it turns out to be one of the most beautiful places I'd ever been. People were gorgeous. We shot outside of Bucharest. But it's a long way from home. And when I get there, there's a man there by the name of Patrick Richwood, who I had done a commercial with like 4 years earlier, that came up to me and said, Richard. And I said, Patrick. And he says, wow, you're a mess. And I said, thanks. And he goes, when we get back to the States, I'm going to introduce you to someone who's going to change your life, but not until you're ready. I'm like, yeah, whatever. That's cryptic enough. Whatever. Yeah. So I drank my way through this job, which was lucky because I played an alcoholic in the thing. I played a drunk by the name of Kinch. It takes place in like the Dark Ages. When I get back home, I pick up exactly where I left off, only now I had 3 stacks of bills to the ceiling. And I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I'm too old to go back to college, and I didn't want to change careers. I didn't know how to do anything else. And
Right.
so I called him up one night and I go, okay, who is this person? And he goes, okay, I'm going to send you this person, but you're going to resist this person. You go, I don't need another acting teacher. I've been doing this since I was 5. And he was right, because I was still leading with my ego. But trust me, she'll change your life. So on a cold February morning, many, many years ago, it was a Tuesday. I'll never forget it. I drive out to the Mid-Wilshire district, to this area, to this theater called 2,100 square feet that had been written by this woman, had been created by this woman named Diana Castle. So it's a Tuesday morning. Nobody's there. I walk in and she's in her office and she goes, go sit on the stage in the theater. I'll be in a moment. Like, okay. So I sit down on this stage and I wait for her to come in, and she comes in. And she hands me a monologue and she says, I want you to work on this for 20 minutes and then I'll come back in. So I did. She comes back in, she sits down, she goes, go ahead. And I did this monologue and I was amazing. I was great. I'd never been funnier. I was great. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, Patrick was right. This is what I needed. I'm good to go. I don't need any more. And when I finished, Dinah Castle sat there like this for 3 minutes. And I'm getting really uncomfortable. And then she finally says, wow, you're really product oriented. And I say, well, thank you. She goes, no, I mean, your comedy is amazing. I said, thank you. I've been doing this a long time. She goes, I mean, your timing is impeccable. I said, yes. And she goes, I bet you're good at drama too. I'm like, well, I don't want to brag, but yes, you get me. She goes, I bet you know how to hold an audience right in the palm of that hand. You feel that laughter, the snickering, and then boom, you hit them with the punchline and they're rolling on the floor laughing. And I'm like, yep. And she goes, same with drama, huh? You can feel the tension in the room, the quiet. You feel that first sniffle, you hear it, and you just massage it until they're rolling on the floor. I mean, until they're crying. And I'm like, yeah, you get me. Patrick was right. This is the place for me. She goes, that's great. Let me ask you something. What happens when they don't laugh? What happens when they don't cry? What happens to you? And because I was still leading with my ego, I, of course, said the following. Well, it was probably a Friday night. My friends waited till the very last weekend to even come and see my play, and they couldn't find parking. And she goes, well, you make jokes because that's your defense mechanism, but you know what you do. You push harder to try and get them back. And if you can't get them back, you just say, oh, they're a bad audience. But inside you're going, how did I mess up? Why did I suck on that? I'm like, wow, that hurts. And then she said, consider this. In a secondary reality, which is what I call playing pretend, there is no audience you're trying to make laugh. There is no audience you're trying to make cry. But you have placed your well-being and validation as an actor on the response you get from an audience. And if you don't get it, imagine what that does to your I am, which is I am enough because I'm a human being. And so now I'm like, oh, this is hurting. This is hurting right now. And then she said this. She said, you say you don't want to play the nerd anymore. Is that right? And I said, yeah, that's right. She goes, so what do you do when you get this audition for the nerd? And you will confirm this. She said, what do? Do you slick your hair down, maybe part it in the middle, maybe put on a Hawaiian shirt buttoned to the top with a bow tie, hike your pants up so you got your flooded pants with white socks and black
She's
penny
just
loafers.
turning that stiletto now.
and I'm like thinking, yes. And I said, yes, that's exactly what I do. And she said, well, no wonder you don't want to be the nerd. Because you, Richard, don't want to be seen as the nerd. So you've created something outside of yourself that you two are laughing at and making fun of. Imagine what that does to your I am enough because I'm a human being. Wow. So now I'm like really I'm like, I don't know what, I'm having a really visceral emotional response. And she said to me, she goes, consider this. People who are considered nerds don't think of themselves as nerds. Again, pre-Silicon Valley, pre-cool. She goes, rather, there are people in this world that feel socially awkward, uncomfortable in parties and meat markets and being amongst other people where they feel less than, embarrassed. Rather, there are people that want to stay around people that don't judge them. because they like to play role-playing games or Dungeons and Dragons. That's where they feel safe. And then she hit me with a thing that changed my life. She said, stop thinking as an actor and start thinking as a human being again. And that's all she had to say for my perception to shift 1/1,000,000th of a click. And I embarked on a 5-year journey with Diana Castle to go from being an impressor to an expressor, about being able to give to somebody on stage, to give to somebody in the booth, to give to somebody in a film, and not always be trying to take to fill myself up with security and laughter and all that. And that is what I applied to voiceover. And as soon as I made that adjustment in my life, and I was happy being
That's
where
got to
I
be one of
am
the
right
best
now.
acting classes I've ever had. And,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, truly understand it, because it is exactly the idea of what makes a great performance is it's inside out. It's not outside in. You've been successful at this now. What is it? 20, like for 20 years at
30
least, right?
I guess I started working full-time in voiceover around 90 or so. So,
Now, my son and I, and my family, we loved Ben 10. So I
oh
love Gray
yeah,
Matter.
I played Gray Matter. Oh man, it's hero time. It's just
What was
basically
your
Johnny
favorite?
Carson on helium.
What was your favorite show, or still favorite if you're still working on it?
It's really hard to say my favorite show because so much of myself goes into these stories that I like to disappear into the play pretend.
Yeah.
I say that I like them for different reasons. I like different things about each one. So, like, if you go back to Angry Beavers, that was my first full-time series where I got to create the character, and it was the closest to my personality. So that was fun. But then Invader Zim, the writing, the comedy, the cast, it was just like it was nothing I'd ever been involved with. It was such a I'm really into random
And that's
humor,
like
which is
Futurama, where they just keep canceling it
yeah.
and bringing it back,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
like you guys are on a cycle of working again on it,
Well,
or are you
we did
down
a
now?
movie, and then nothing ever came of that either, but it still continues to go on. The fan base, I now have the kids of the kids that grew up with it
Right.
that come up to me. But and then Billy and Mandy, I loved because I got to improvise up a storm. I got my wife Chris and I got to write for the series, and I love that. I loved everything about that. And now
When you're writing for cartoons like that, do they have a writer's room? Do you submit a
they
script and
do.
then it gets punched up, or how does it work?
Yeah, so you have 2 elements of it. You have not only the script, but you also have the storyboard. So, like, in one of the best episodes that I wrote for Billy and Mandy and Kristen and I wrote together was a thing called, um, it was called, The Keeper of the Reaper. And it was my idea, so I wrote out the script, and then that's handed to the storyboardist, and he takes it, and he took it from another perspective, which was brilliant. He created a different character that had gotten jury duty that day, because my idea was just, who if Mandy and I are fighting, who gets custody of the Reaper? And so it became a court trial, and he created this character named Fred Fredberger, who it's his first day of jury duty, and he's sitting on this court, and they added a song and everything. It turned out to be one of the best episodes of the show by all accounts, and by fans loving it. So that's what I loved about that. Now currently I'm on 2 shows. One's called Hell of a Boss, which is on YouTube, but it's got over like 40 million views per episode.
Whoa.
And yeah, it blows away TV and cable numbers like you wouldn't believe. Then there's Hazbin Hotel, which is on Amazon, and that's the one that I direct, and that is the one that stars.
Is this the first time you're directing?
So I voice direct both shows. So I'm on Hell of a Boss and I voice direct it. And I'm no, I voice directed for the pilot of Nihai Kai Lan on Nickelodeon, but I didn't continue with that one. But this is the first time I really was involved because I was really.
What's the difference for you as far as being a director when you're directing? Because obviously they want you to be a director, and because you know the business and you know how to create characters. But how is it different when you're directing?
So I approach it the same way as I do acting. All I have to do is talk story to the actors. I go, in this story, this is happening and blah blah blah. And I've never ever had to give a line reading ever in any time that and on this show, we have the luxury of time, but these people are all consummate professionals. They can get it right then. They go, oh, that's good.
Right.
And they'll get it. And I enjoy it a lot because I work closely with the creator and we both see eye to eye. And that creator grew up watching Invader Zim and Billy and Mandy. And that's why she wanted to work with me. And I always knew when I was younger, when I first started, I knew that someday I would work with somebody who had grown up watching my shows that would be in a position of power. And
that's a pretty spectacular understanding very early on.
here's the thing. You know how I was talking about on the set of Summer School, and I always kind of felt like an outsider. Even as a kid, I felt like an outsider for multitude of reasons. I always felt like,
Well, the sixth kid, you kind of were.
Yeah.
You were just an afterthought. Yeah.
exactly. In fact, I spend my days collecting the toys I had when I was a kid that my mom had given away or something. My parents long since passed away, but like I collected my, do you remember the Sheaux And Tell where it had the slide and the record player and it would advance? It was like, looked like
Yeah.
a TV set. I've got that. It's up there. I've got my Mattel Hot Wheels track with the turbo
The loop,
car
the loop,
wash.
uh-huh.
I got everything. I my Tonka Jeep that is actually made out of metal, everything, because that brings me comfort of like those days. But
Yeah.
the thing about knowing those things is that if you look at the characters I've played, they're always an outsider. Invader Zim is an outsider. My fan base
Yeah.
is goth kids that felt out of it, that felt very like I have a huge goth fan base from that show. The shows I'm on now has a huge LGBTQ trans community following. People that have always felt outside. I've always felt outside because in my mind, I'm like, Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise in my head.
I
And then
remember
it's like,
you
no.
were very much in your boss, in your
Bruce Springsteen.
Springsteen phase when
Yeah.
we were doing Summer School.
Yeah, still in that phase. Yeah, I still love Bruce. But yeah, so I just knew it. I knew it because I knew that these shows that I was doing spoke to a certain segment, and Vivian Madrano, Vivzy Pop, who is the creator of our show, she,
Uh-huh.
she really related to these shows, and I knew that it would. And I do conventions. I'm doing 30 conventions.
And she's
this
the
year.
creator of Helava or Hazbin?
Both Helava and Hazbin.
Oh,
So they're both in the same
okay.
world. They're called the Hellaverse. And that's what we call it because it's the Hellaverse. It takes place in hell, both shows.
Well, okay, so we got to move on to to the what I call the questions. Oh no, before we do that,
Yeah.
like one other independent film you did, we talked about it a little bit, called The Informant. It had a kid named Matt Damon and Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah.
So obviously, just by those two names, no matter how well the movie did in comparison to their other films, you
Yeah.
know, walking in, it's a high quality, big time deal. What was the
Yeah.
experience there for you?
So it was great. I flew first class, which is always nice when you're on a show. I flew
That's
first class.
that's a big one.
That's a big one. I got first class tickets with Tony Hale to
Uh-huh.
Chicago, and we were supposed to have a 3-day shoot in Chicago, and then another I think it was another week back in LA. So it's been a 3-day shoot in Chicago. So Tony and I fly to Chicago, and we're going to shoot all the exteriors in Chicago, I think is what we're doing. And so this is going to be fun. 3 days in Chicago. It's not going to be too hard. And we shot it very fast. The whole thing was shot in 4 weeks because Matt was in between movies. I think he had to go shoot another what were those movies that he did with
The Bourne franchise,
not the Bournes,
or
the
Ocean 11s.
Oceans, one of the Ocean
I
pictures,
get,
yeah.
I get my
Movies?
my movies confused as well, like with all
Yeah.
the sequels that I do. So
Yeah,
I can only
so-
imagine for him.
So we get to Chicago, and it's our first day shooting, and Steven Soderbergh likes to shoot it himself because that's how he started. He started as a cinematographer, so
Yeah.
he blocks a scene. We shoot a thing. We do another setup. We do another setup. We do another setup. And they go, okay, that's a wrap on Chicago.
Whoa.
One day. So
Seriously, you're in that
Kid
movie
you not.
only one day? Because it's not like, it doesn't feel like that when you watch it.
I know.
You're all
But
over
he
it.
got everything he needed. A lot of it's handheld. And the thing is that I was bummed, but I still get paid for 3 days. But the crew doesn't. The crew doesn't. So they're like, that's it for us, right? So It was a lot of fun. Tony and I hung out. I run into Tony quite a bit.
He's one of the
lately.
funniest people.
Very
I don't
funny.
know him personally. I'm just a huge fan.
He's a very funny guy. Very nice guy. Very nice guy.
I'm going
Matt
to
was a
Army,
nice
mother.
guy. Yeah. Well, there was this one point where we're doing an exterior establishing shot, where in fact, that's it right there. If you look on that, that's my informant picture. That was the ad that ran in the Times. And I was like, wow, I'm featured in the Times as the ad for the movie. Was nice. Where we're doing exterior shots and we're walking towards the thing. And it's got music over it, obviously, in the final product. But as we're walking, I'm just kind of improvising with, like, to Matt. Like, okay, now when we get in there, blah, blah, blah. And Matt just keeps looking at me going, but he's not saying anything. And so we get in there and he goes, just so you know, this is, MOS. And you shouldn't say any words at all. You shouldn't talk. I'm like, oh, okay. I felt like embarrassed, right? I felt embarrassed. And
Damon
then
said that to you, or
Matt Damon said that. It's sweet. It's very nice, but he had said that to me. But inside, I'm feeling like chided, like I'm an idiot. I'm a newbie, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I was doing summer school while you were still in kindergarten, So that's my head goes there.
Well, I mean, I have great respect for his talent, but he's absolutely wrong. MOS
Exactly.
just means that there's no sound. It has
There's
nothing
no
to do
sound,
with
so our
whether-
mouths can be moving.
Unless he's one of those people that have done so many movies that he realized that, if I'm moving my mouth at some point, they're going to want me.
I'm going to have to come in an ADR.
And I don't know what I'm going to say, and it's going to look bad. And he had a bad experience. But for the rest of us, it's like, ooh, ADR day.
So I say this to Fred Willard, who I was working with. I worked a lot with Fred Willard. And Fred said to me exactly what you just said. He said, what? Of course you can talk during the thing. Who cares if it's MOS? Who cares if it's establishing? We can go in and do ADR if we have to, but if there's music over it, who cares? I mean, he was like, really?
I'm sorry I'm busting your story. That's a much better story than me talking.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. No, I was like, no, you're absolutely right, because it's the same.
When you're working with somebody like a Matt Damon, though, okay, so obviously that one moment. But and again, Soderbergh, it's not a bloated production by any means at 4 weeks. You're there to work.
Yeah.
I would have been excited, and I think you were too, of like, oh, I'm going to get to soak in some of the Soderbergh magic or have a hang with Matt Damon.
Yeah.
But it's a couple hours and you're gone.
And you're done.
And
they chartered a Southwest plane to fly us all home. So there was nobody in there. And here's the thing, things we don't know. When it's a chartered plane, meaning this plane is just for us. We're the only ones on it. And they're bringing out, cold cuts and champagne and everything. The same rules do not apply. Your seat back does not have to be up. Your tray table can be down on takeoff and landing. Things that I had no idea about.
Now we're getting into the Led Zeppelin on tour stories.
Exactly.
You were sitting there reading your book and your tray table was down when they landed.
Yeah, because sometimes I don't put my phone in airplane mode.
Well, thank God. Thank God. Listen, so I got to ask, because he's a huge star. Yeah. How was Matt Damon in general? I mean,
Matt Damon was great. He was great. There was one moment where we're gonna do this bit we're gonna shoot this thing, and he says to Steven, I thought on this one I would do this, that, and this, and then maybe this and that and the other. Spills out this whole thing that he had worked out in his head and his mind and in his script and everything. And Steven just goes, all right, try it, and walks away. And Matt turns to me and he says, you better do your homework, because that's all you're going to get. But Matt, it was during the basketball championship. It was the Celtics versus the Lakers. And I'm obviously an LA guy. He's a Boston guy. Yeah. So he said, oh, we're going to wipe the floor with you. I go, no, you don't. You want to bet? He goes, yeah. And so we bet some piddly thing. But when I came home to my wife, I said, Matt and I made a bet on the world, on the championship, on the NBA championship. And she says, well, how much? I said, $10,000. And she says, what? But it wasn't really. I don't even remember who won the series. I'm sure Boston won. But even if they did, I didn't pay Matt.
We'll be back after these messages. Hey there, my name is Patrick Labyorteaux, and I play an actor on TV. And I also have this acting school called Working Actors School. And what we do there is we teach people to act using Zoom. So you can take an acting class with me and with a person in Connecticut, in Florida, and San Diego all at the same time, thanks to the miracle of Zoom. And besides classes, I also offer a one-on-one session. It's an hour just between you and me working on a particular piece of material, whether it's for an upcoming audition or maybe you're working on something and you need to have that breakthrough moment. These are really, really fun, and they're really, really great because they're really personalized and intense in all the good ways that intense can be. So if you're working on something, if you want to break through, if you want to have a one-on-one session where you're not working with other people, this is the way to do it. All the information is in the classes page on workingactorsschool.com. Act 4, questions. This is the questions. It's a part of the show where I just ask you questions. It's real, real simple. You'll know all the answers because it's all about you. So the first one is called That's SheauxBiz. What is the most Hollywood moment of your life?
Oh, I guess I was sitting front row center at the Oscars. That was very Hollywood. Is that Hollywood-ish?
How'd that happen? Not that you, I mean,
My brother was
don't deserve to be
directing
there.
them. My brother was
Okay.
directing them, and it was the year of again. Here's my brain with movie titles. It was the year of Good Will Hunting, in a strange irony.
Wow.
And I was sitting next to, and it was up against Boogie Nights also. And everyone thought that Burt Reynolds was going to win that year. And I was sitting next to Charlton Heston and his wife, and she kept putting her hand on my knee. She kept putting her hand on my knee. And at some point, you know, Robin Williams won that year for Good Will Hunting. And I looked over at Burt Reynolds, who was just like this. At one point, I looked up and Burt Reynolds was gone. He just left the show. And Charlton Heston's wife leaned over to me at one point and said, "Who won for Best Supporting Actor?" I said, "Robin Williams." And she goes, "Oh, damn, I was voting for Burt Reynolds."
And she's in the front row with you,
She's
so
in the
you
front row,
know
yeah. And he's like,
she's
"Go on."
watching the same show.
Yeah.
That is I can't beat that Hollywood moment. Okay,
That's
so
Hollywood.
that's SheauxBiz Part 2. What's the most embarrassing Hollywood moment?
What's the most embarrassing Hollywood moment? Ooh, that's a tough one. Have I, you know, it's really hard to admit when I was ever embarrassed, but I guess maybe that story I told about where I had to rewrite what I had written to Mark Harmon on the script. I was really embarrassed. It was really embarrassed that I was
that's good.
cocky. That's
a good answer.
Yeah.
This one's called Sheaux Me The Money. What is your biggest missed financial opportunity? Now, I'm not looking for dollars, numbers, or anything like that. But like we always get opportunities because it's like somebody on the set knows somebody. But what's your biggest missed financial opportunity?
My missed financial opportunity. I think I would have made more on that Police Academy 3 than I did on Summer School. I think that's probably true. I think the deal was a little bit sweeter, but I'll take Paramount over whatever studio it was at the time.
Well, if I remember, I don't remember TBS playing Police Academy 3 24/7 during the 80s. So
TBS, USA, HBO, Max.
The next one is called Sheaux And Tell.
Yeah.
As a teenager, what was your favorite poster in your room and how did you come to obtain it?
I know everyone thinks it's probably Farrah Fawcett because we all
I've
had
had
that
one Farrah Fawcett. You
had a Farrah Fawcett. Mine was that Beatles poster that was outside, I believe, the Cavern Club with the blue brick wall behind them, and they're sitting there. That was mine. I bought it at, I think, a poster store. There used to be poster stores. Like there used to be a Chicken Shirt and there used and Licorice Pizza. I think I bought the poster at Licorice Pizza and it was up on my wall. And I think I still have the poster to this day because I was a huge Beatles fanatic and the Monkees. I love the Monkees.
How can you not? Both of them had such great
I'm
music.
a big proponent that they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and more so than some others, because yes, they were a TV band, but they became a real band. It's like Pinocchio, right?
There's a couple of things here I want to talk about.
Yeah.
One of the greatest quotes I ever heard from Mickey Dolenz was like, he goes, being in the Monkees was like being on a hospital show, and then someone said you need to operate, and you need to operate on someone for real. It was like I
Yeah.
was playing a musician on a rock and roll show, and now I'm playing music for real.
Yeah.
And two, our mutual buddy Dean Cameron has
Yes.
many monkey
Yes.
connections.
With
He was in a
Amy
band with
Dolenz.
Christian, and he
Yeah.
worked in a movie with Amy Dolenz.
Yeah.
He knows all the monkey kids.
Interesting side note. Mickey Dolenz went to Grant High School with my brother, who's the director, and
my
he
God.
grew up in my neighborhood. Yeah. And his sister Coco. Yeah.
Yeah, this whole town is lousy with us actors.
The Valley.
This one, in honor of your toy, is called
Mm.
Sheaux Down.
Oh boy.
Best thing you ever did, worst thing you ever did.
In life?
No, no, like we won't talk about the murder, but like in like professionally.
Oh, you're talking best thing I ever did. Wow.
Yeah, what's the best thing you ever did? What's your worst performance? Best performance, worst performance.
Oh, my best performance, I think, is INVADER ZIM is probably my best performance. I was young and I was like,
No questions
mentally.
about the quality, but why? Why is that like so important?
I
to you?
was young. My mind was agile, was a lot more agile, so I could improvise very quickly. I'm like Jenny. Remember that? Do you remember that?
I love that show.
We did that when we were doing, like, we did improv together. Do you remember that? Remember that years ago? You were doing
No.
improv? You
Yeah,
don't
we did
remember that?
improv together?
Yes, when you had that improv group, we did it, and I would do that.
Oh,
I'm like
God.
Jenny.
Oh my God, I totally forgot about that.
I know. But
Holy
my mind
shit.
was agile, and I was young, and I was, just really about the playing pretend. So that's my best. Worst?
Yeah.
Do I know the honest to goodness truth?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's my worst, but I do have a hard time watching Summer School because I was
Wow.
making a lot of faces, forgetting that it's a difference between a TV screen that's this big versus
Yeah.
a huge screen. And I remember our cinematographer coming up to me at one point on the set and goes, "Try listening more. Just try listening."
Whoa.
Yeah. And he didn't mean it in a like, "Hey, dude, shut up." It wasn't about
No,
my
he's the one
talking.
looking through the camera. He sees
Yes,
everything.
yeah.
The cinematographers see everything.
And I see things on Summer School that really bother me because Dean and I went to a screening that someone hosted at in Los Feliz that they wanted to show Summer School.
Uh-huh.
And then we did a Q&A afterwards. And I was backstage and Dean's like, "What's the problem?" I said, "I don't like watching myself. Like, even like listening, I'm like going, like, those things really stand out to me." Of course, this is, 40 plus years hindsight. But
Right.
Dean said, "It was the 80s, man. We were all doing that." I'm like, "Oh, not all
For
of us."
sure. I mean, it was a different literally a different time.
Yeah.
And also, but I think for you on a more personal level, based on just this conversation, you're reacting to the engine that was driving you at that point,
At
which
the
is
time,
a completely
at that
different
time.
engine than it is now. Yeah.
Yeah. I would think that's a good observation. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think it was my worst performance ever, but I think
No,
that
but on an
there are, like,
emotional level, that's where you went to.
an
for the
emotional
answer.
level, that's
get
where
it.
I went. That's where I went.
Yeah, look, as a third party, I can tell you, you were very funny in the movie, and not with
Thanks.
any caveats. It's like and I think people, love you in that role.
Well,
but I
thank
get
you.
it.
Thank you. Yeah.
This one is called. This is a new one. You're the
God,
first
these
one
are
to
tough.
have this question.
These are tough, Patrick. These are tough.
You know all these answers because
Okay.
they're all about you. This one is a brand new one. This one's
Oh,
called
are you
No
gonna try a
Show.
new one on me?
Trying a new one fresh on you.
Okay. All right. Let's see how this goes.
No Show. What part did you really want but didn't get?
I wanted the part of Ross Geller in Friends, but it was already promised to David Schwimmer.
Whatever happened to that show?
I don't know. I read for
Wow.
that, and if I had known they had already chosen David Schwimmer,
Right.
the fact of the matter is that I still watch Friends religiously to this day and still go, God, I wish I had done the show. I wish I had done the show. I mean, I read twice, even though they were already planning to offer it to David Schwimmer, but it's not right. It's again, I'm not what they cast in that thing. What they cast was perfect in that show.
No, of course. I mean, it's not like I totally get it. I still tell the story about on Mary Tyler Moore's show, Ted Knight had a kid and Robbie Risk plays the kid.
Oh,
and
Robbie.
I auditioned for it. And I'm still bitter that I didn't get the part because sometimes you just can't let go of stuff. But I get it. And again, during that period of time, there are pilots, and then when you read a good pilot, which Friends was a really good pilot, you automatically know,
you want it. This is good. We all.
In fact, I did a show called Last Frontier, which was Friends in Alaska. It's like they did 1,000 pilots after that of just that idea. All right.
You said, I just want to interject for a second. You said Robbie Rist. And when you say Robbie Rist, I love Robbie. He's a good friend of mine. And the thing that I think warms my heart to this day is that we're still all here, that we're still like I think like I do conventions with Jerry Mathers. And I see Barry Livingston always posting things about politics and stuff that we're all experiencing at the same time. But in my mind, they live in television world. You know what I'm saying? They live in television.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it doesn't occur to me that we're all experiencing the world at the same time. But when I see you and I see Dean and I see Moosey and I see Ike and I see Robbie, I go, wow, here we are. We're still here. We're getting old together, which is like kind of, I think, cool. So,
all right. One last question.
Okay.
This one's called Show Me Some Love. What's your favorite performance of mine?
You know the answer to this. You know the answer to this. It is Andy Garvey. It is Andy Garvey without a doubt. You live in my television mind and you will always be Andy Garvey.
Okay, excellent answer. Epilogue. Okay, so here we are in the epilogue. I don't know if you've got any sessions going, but I do know that you have an amazing school or seminars for voiceover and for acting. Can you tell us about that and where can they find it?
Yeah, based on what I learned from my mentor, Dinah Castle, who I mentioned, I teach something called The Art of Playing Pretend, designed to remind us of what it was like to play as we did when we were children before we got stuck in our head being our own director as we're trying to play. And so when we are auditioning, we have a tendency to think we have a tendency to be they oriented, meaning we're doing it for people out there, like the casting people or something.
What are they looking for? What do they want?
And what most actors end up doing is acting the breakdown. And I have a saying, if you're familiar with SAG statistics, the working actor that's supporting themselves only books 2 to 3% of everything they read for. And if you're booking 2 to 3% of everything you're reading for, you're supporting yourself as a working actor. But it also means that 97 to 98% of the time we're going into that booth by ourselves with our workstation, with our DAW, with our script, with our one light, trying to impress people 97 to 98% of the time that we're never going to see, meet, hear, or know. And so I teach a class that teaches people to remember what it was like to play pretend and play pretend uninhibitedly. And if you're interested in that, you can go to my website, which is just richardhorvitz.com. And there's a classes button. You can just click on it and fill out the form. It'll go to my classes email, and you will be.
There's going to be a link in the description as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So it's right down there. And I teach that. And so I'm always on the road these days. I'm on the road this year, 29 of the 52 weekends this year, doing conventions. Like I'm all over the country.
How do you, I mean, obviously I've done conventions as well. And basically the world of a convention is you sit at a table and people who know you and like you come up to you and compliment you. So, I mean, obviously it's not a bad gig, but how do you find it? How do you find, what's your experience? How do you like it?
So I love it. I love it because, the fans are always so endearing and sweet. And it's funny because they'll say, "You were my childhood," and I'm like, "Oh, well, your parents owe me babysitting money." But it's really endearing, and what's more endearing is that kids that grew up on my early work, they're now adults with kids of their own who are fans of my work, and
Right.
so that part of it is great. I love the travel. I love the places I get to see and go. I've been everywhere from Vienna, Austria to Sydney, Australia. I've been to Australia 6 times doing
Oh,
these.
wow.
And I travel with my wife Kristen, so it's great because our kids are grown, and we have the time to do it, and so we do it, and it's fun.
I
It's really,
remember
really
it
fun.
was hysterical. We all did a convention in Pasadena. It was
Yes.
myself, Dean Cameron,
Ken Olant.
um, Ken Olant, and
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
and we were all in a line.
Yeah.
And it was like Richard had the corner, which is if you must know, the very cool place to be because you get traffic from both sides. And then it was, I think, Ken Olant, then Dean, then myself. And it was like Richard's was like the most busy table. And it was like a ghetto for the rest of us from summer school. It was so funny. We were sitting there signing each other's photographs for each other.
I remember this.
In fact, what was so funny is like when you go to conventions, you have you've got a ton of merch that you sign pops, you have all
Yeah.
this different stuff. If you're like me, sometimes you'll have a banner where it's like, oh, this is the movies I was in. And then if you're like Dean, you don't have
This is my
that.
favorite
So
thing.
I'm gonna throw this picture up here.
Yes.
So Dean drew his own little banner. And you'll see it. It's just the most ridiculous sign that
It
he
was
drew.
just a piece of paper.
I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. But you could, I mean, and again, we're not talking money, but it was like, it was so funny because it was so obvious, how, I guess the theme of this show, right? For the outsider who didn't feel like he was one of the cool kids,
Yeah.
you had the stripper, the cool guy, and the athlete just
Yeah.
sitting there twiddling our thumbs, and you had a line all the way down the aisle, and
I mean-
deservedly so because the work you've done is amazing. But I think that's got to be some sort of kind of example of how it's all different.
Well, you're way too kind, and thank you. And I don't look at it that way at all. I look at it as, wow, I'm still friends with people that we had a shared experience 40 years ago. And like I said, I love that
Wow.
we're all still friends. I love that we've gotten the chance to hang out more in the past years. I remember one time I was trying to set you up with my sister-in-law. I don't know if you remember this, when I was living
I
in
don't.
Los Feliz. I was living in Los Feliz, and my wife's sister was single. And you came out. I was living in Los Feliz, and you knew it was an obvious setup.
I don't remember this.
I know, but
I remember I was working on JAG and I fell in love with one of the producers by the name of Tina Albanese. We ended up getting married.
yeah,
But for the first year, we dated secretly because we were both working on the show.
working on the
So
same
we didn't
show.
want,
Yeah,
didn't want anyone to know, didn't want to. And my co-star, David James Elliott, the big tall guy, the hero guy on the show, he's a good guy. And he kept saying, hey man, I got this girlfriend I want to set you up with. And I was like, no, I'm good. Until finally he comes to me one day and he goes, come here. And I go, what's going on, David? And he goes, I get it. I understand. And I'm really sorry. I didn't understand your sexuality. And I know that I've been setting you up with the wrong friends of mine. Would you be open to meeting a dude I know who's a really nice guy?
oh my
And
gosh.
then it's like I said, well, no, I'm not interested. Thank you. It was so funny.
We have a lot of history. I don't know if you remember. I don't remember if you remember. I heard about there was an audition for JAG, and I contacted you and I said, they're doing callbacks today. I didn't even get a first. Okay, let me see what I can do. And you were able to get me in on that callback. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like, you're like, oh my God.
I don't. But
Yeah.
I always tried because look, when you work with people that it's better. There was a lot of people from Groundlings that I got on the show, not that I got on the show, but that I would call the producers and say, this is good. This one's good. I like this person. They're really, you can count on them because again, and I was going to talk to you about this with Matt Damon. I think a lot of times when you're a Matt Damon and a Steven Soderbergh, it must be a joy for them, even though they may not recognize it, that when they're working with an actor like yourself or Tony Hale, that when they get to that scene, it's not like you fumble over your dialogue or are nervous. It's like you're a full-on professional and they can knock out 3 days worth of work in 5 hours and not think about it because you're a total pro. And I think that goes a long way in this business. And that works too for obviously
especially
for
on
voiceover.
especially on the time that we're talking about, when you know you only have an allotted amount of time to get something done. Someone's got to be there ready to stand and deliver and do their lines. I remember Mark said that at one point. He said, I'm just a he loved Gary Cooper. I don't know if you remember this, but he had 2
cars, 2 Porsches. Yep. He's Mark Harmon. And we're on his license plates.
And he goes, I'm from that school of acting. You just stand and deliver. I'm like, yeah, I know a little bit more than stand and deliver, but I get what you're talking about.
Well, when you look like Mark Harmon, all you got to do is stand and deliver.
Yeah, when you're an outsider, that's a funny voice, and like you said, this whole thing, you got to do a little bit more.
Well, I love you, man. I'm glad we're friends. Thank you so much for freeing up this time. I will do it anytime with you.
We have so many things we can catch up on.
Oh my gosh. Thank you again, and we will talk soon.
I hope so.
It's the Patrick Labyorteaux, Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. I'm really, really glad you're here and checking out the podcast. It is an audio podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's a video podcast over on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever you get the video ones. All of my socials are Working Actors School on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube. Please check us out. If you want any information about the school, it is at workingactorsschool.com. We've got classes going on all the time. And again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
It's the Patrick Labyorteaux, Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.